When the Hornets took LaMelo Ball with the third pick in the 2020 draft, it seemed like they found their franchise player. He went on to win Rookie of the Year. By year two, he was an all-star, was averaging 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists, and he led the Hornets to a 43-win season. However, a big reason why Charlotte was good that year is because LaMelo was healthy. He played 75 games that year, but he's played just 58 games combined over the past 2 seasons. He missed a lot of time with ankle injuries, and that obviously caused the Hornets to struggle. And it's been kind of bittersweet with that whole situation because LaMelo is someone you obviously want to see play. He's your franchise player. But at the same time, the Hornets did struggle and they got better picks as a result. One reason why Charlotte was never able to build around Kemba is because they could never find the right co-star for him. LaMelo Ball now has Brandon Miller though, and I think they could form a dynamic duo going forward. Brandon Miller is a tall two-way wing who can shoot the ball, create his own shot, and those are the types of guys that championship teams look for. Because LaMelo did miss a lot of time last year, Brandon Miller actually got to show more of what he's capable of. He got to handle the ball more, and I thought that he showed a lot of patience when he was handling the ball. He honestly didn't even really look like a rookie at times. He just showed a lot of patience, especially coming out of the pick and roll, waiting for his screener to establish themselves and set the screen. And he would just come off really well. He can go off into a pull-up. He can come off screens and hit threes. He seems like a guy who's just really good on the ball, but also really good off the ball. And those types of players are just so valuable in the NBA today. He also has lots of potential on defense. As a rookie, he made mistakes on defense at times, but most rookies are going to go through that learning curve adjusting to the NBA, adjusting to playing defense at the NBA level. But something I liked with Brandon Miller is that he just played with so much effort, and you could tell that he actually cared. And when you combine that with the physical tools that he has, the potential versatility he has, that's just a great combination. And for a Charlotte team that has struggled on defense in recent years, having someone like Brandon Miller with the defensive potential that he has is just so big. The Hornets also have Miles Bridges, who obviously has a really bad off-court reputation, but strictly as a basketball player, he is good. He's someone who's very durable. In the 5 years that he's played in Charlotte, he's only missed 23 games. And then the past 2 seasons where he was actually playing, he's averaged 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists. So having someone like that as your third best player behind LaMelo and Brandon Miller is pretty good. Then there's Mark Williams, who only played 19 games last season, but he's shown potential as an athletic center, someone who can make an impact on the boards. Even though it was a small sample size, he was statistically one of the best offensive rebounders in the league last year. And then throughout his first 2 seasons, he's shown potential as a rim protector. Again, it's a small sample size, but when he, LaMelo, and Brandon Miller shared the floor together last season, they outscored teams by over 5 points per 100 possessions. So with those guys being 3 of your most important young players, it's good to see that at least in small glimpses, they've shown you potential that they can actually fit together and be successful on the floor together. Speaking of fit, Charlotte traded for Josh Green this summer, and I think he's just going to be a perfect complement to the young guys they already have. Back when he was in Dallas, he was really relegated to a 3-and-D role, obviously playing next to guys like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, who were very high usage. Kind of limits how much you can show offensively. You're kind of limited to a role where, yeah, you're just going to spot up a lot. Most of your energy is expected to be expended on defense, but he's still only 23 years old, and I think in Charlotte he's still going to be in a reduced role because obviously he's playing next to guys like LaMelo, Miles Bridges, Brandon Miller, but I think he'll get to showcase more of his skills offensively, and then he can bring it on the defensive end, which is an area where Charlotte has struggled. I actually think that Josh Green will be a starter this season. I think the starting lineup will be LaMelo, Josh Green, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, and Mark Williams. And as long as those guys can stay healthy, that lineup is very young, and they have a nice mix of offense and defense. So Charlotte has an exciting starting lineup, but what also excites me about this team is the depth they have coming off their bench. This is a team who was pretty active at last year's trade deadline, and they brought in guys like Vasilij Micic and Tre Mann, 2 guards who with more opportunity played really well for Charlotte. Micic and Tre Mann weren't really getting minutes on the Thunder. When they came to Charlotte, Micic averaged 11 points and 6 assists. Tre Mann averaged 12 points and 5 assists. Micic is a veteran guard who knows how to run an offense, and if LaMelo does ever have to miss time with injury, it's good to know if you're Charlotte that you have a veteran guard who can step up and fill his role at least a little bit. Then Tre Mann is just a really dynamic offensive piece to have off your bench, and he's someone who can be really explosive on some nights and give you a lot of scoring and offensive production off the bench. Charlotte also traded for Grant Williams last year, and while he's still a pretty young player at 25 years old, in his short NBA career he's played majority of it for the Boston Celtics, a really good winning team who's made deep playoff runs. He just knows how to play a role and do whatever the team asks of him. He can defend, he can space the floor and knock down threes. I think he's just going to complement guys like LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams really well. And there's a good chance he actually starts for this team. I think that Josh Green will start, but I could see him starting next to LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, and Mark Williams, and that being their starting five. Even if he does come off the bench, it's good to know that you have another starting caliber player in your rotation. So those were 3 good additions for Charlotte at last year's deadline. Then there's obviously Tijan Salon, who's their rookie this season. He's someone who's still pretty raw. He was one of the youngest players in the draft this year, but he does have a lot of potential. He's 6'9", has a 7'2" wingspan, and when you watch him play, you can see why he was taken so high. He's athletic, he has a fluid-looking jumper. Obviously, with his size and length, he has a lot of defensive potential. The fear that people have with Salon is that maybe he's just shown flashes of potential and that he's not ever going to actually live up to the player that some scouts think he can be. He was really inefficient in the league he played in France. He is still very young, but his overall touch just didn't look great, and that's something that's not always easy to fix. I still like the pick for Charlotte though. If it works out and he lives up to his potential, you're going to have a really big team. LaMelo's already a big guard, but if you surround him with guys like Brandon Miller, Tijan Salon, Miles Bridges, and then Mark Williams at center, that's a really big, long lineup with defensive potential. Obviously, there's the offensive upside there. That could be a really scary team going forward, and in a draft that many people considered to be weak, I like that Charlotte took a chance and swung at a guy who has a lot of potential. At the backup center spot, the Hornets have Nick Richards, who's just a very solid big man. He's someone who's not going to do anything flashy or anything exciting, but he's actually one of the best screen setters in the NBA. Between him and Mark Williams, these two were near the top of the league last season in screen assists, as well as points generated off screens. Having a guy who just embraces doing the little things is so important, and it just adds to the depth of this Hornets team. Charlotte has also made some big changes leadership-wise. They brought in veterans like Seth Curry, Taj Gibson. Obviously, we know last year they brought in new ownership. And then this summer, they brought in Charles Lee to be their new head coach. Since the Hornets drafted LaMelo, they've struggled to find a consistent head coach. They started out with James Borrego. After he was fired, they tried to get Kenny Atkinson, who actually agreed to a contract, but then he backed out at the last second, which caused the Hornets to turn to Steve Clifford. This is a guy who coached in Charlotte not too long ago, but eventually got fired. So trying to bring someone back for a second stint when the first time they ended up getting fired probably isn't the best decision going forward. So yeah, the past 2 years, it kind of felt like Steve Clifford was just the second option, someone who was a placeholder option until this team found their actual head coach of the future. And I think they found that in Charles Lee. Charles Lee is a young coach who just seems really, really likable. I watched his introductory press conference and he just seems like a guy who's going to really be able to rally these young players together. And when you combine those things with the reports that LaMelo is considering wearing ankle braces next season, that just makes me really excited about this team because yes, they're very good on paper, but they're not going to be able to reach their fullest potential if LaMelo isn't healthy. So hearing that he's considering ankle braces is just a really good sign. The last time he was healthy and played a lot of games was his second season. He played 75 games. The Hornets had a pretty deep team, and they went 43-39. I don't know if he's going to play 75 games this year, but I do think he'll be a lot more healthy and available. So as a result, I have the Hornets finishing 9th in the East. I think it's easy to argue that they could actually be in the top 8. There's bound to be at least one team whose record suffers because of injuries, and if the Hornets can take advantage of that, they could get into the top 8, make the playoffs, and have a breakout season. Anyways, that's going to be all for today's video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. With all of that being said, I'm out, and I'll see you in the next video.